Here is a crazy thought for you. You just dropped over $300 on a premium, super thick winter fishing jacket to stay warm on the ice or the bank. You are completely comfortable, but your bucket is completely empty. Why? Because that expensive jacket is secretly acting like a giant, terrifying alarm bell to every fish in a 20-foot radius. Today, we are breaking down a topic that will make you rethink everything you do when you step out into the cold. I am going to show you exactly why your heavy winter gear casts a massive shadow that completely spooks the fish before you even make a cast. By the end of this video, you will realize why the old school advice of standing tall and proud over your fishing hole is absolute garbage. Does your shadow really matter that much? Let me know in the comments if you think fish care about what is happening up top, and let us get right into the hard truth. For generations, the old school guys have been passing down the same winter fishing habits. You bundle up to survive the freezing cold, you march right up to the water or drill a hole in the ice, and you stand directly over it waiting for a bite. We do it because staying warm is our top priority. We have always believed that once the water gets cold or freezes over, the fish hunker down and stop paying attention to the outside world. The common belief is that the fish are basically blind down there, so it does not matter how big your coat is or where you stand. But things have changed. Our waters are clearer, our fish are way more pressured, and science tells us that fish vision in winter is sharper than ever. If you have been doing the same thing for 30 years and your catch rates are dropping, it is time to look at the massive footprint you leave behind. Let us start by painting a picture of a typical cold winter morning on the water. You wake up early, drink your coffee, and put on the heaviest, thickest winter jacket you own, because the temperature is well below freezing. You walk out to your favorite spot, whether that is a frozen lake or a clear, cold riverbank. The sun is just starting to peek over the horizon. Because it is winter, that sun is going to stay very low in the sky all day long. Now, look down at the ground or the ice. What do you see? You see a shadow that stretches out forever. A guy who is 6 feet tall can easily cast a shadow that is 20 or 30 feet long. When you are out there freezing, you are mostly thinking about your bait and keeping your hands warm. You are probably not thinking about that giant dark shape stretching across the water. But that massive shadow is projecting straight into the world of the fish. It is like a dark storm cloud suddenly rolling over their heads. When you walk, that giant shadow slides across the bottom of the lake. Fish need their environment to feel safe and predictable. A sudden massive shadow sweeping across the weed bed is a huge red flag for them. It screams that danger is near. We often forget that what happens above the water has a direct impact on what happens below. That huge shadow you're dragging around might be the exact reason your spot feels totally dead. Now, let us talk about why a shadow is such a big deal to a fish. You have to think about how fish survive in the wild. From the moment they hatch, they are on the menu for almost everything. Their biggest threats often come from above. Think about eagles, ospreys, herons, and even larger predator fish that attack from the upper water column. When a bird of prey dives, it casts a fast-moving shadow right before it strikes. Because of this, fish are hardwired by nature to panic when a sudden shadow crosses over them. It is an instinct they cannot control. They do not look up and think, "Oh, that is just a fisherman in a puffy jacket." Their brain just says, "Big shadow means death, run away." So, when your 20-foot winter jacket silhouette falls over a school of panfish or a wary walleye, their survival instincts kick into high gear. They scatter, or at the very least, they stop feeding and lock down tight to the bottom. They become spooked and stressed. You might have the best bait in the world sitting right in front of their noses, but if they feel threatened by a giant dark shape looming above, they are not going to bite. Understanding this basic survival instinct is the first step to realizing why your bulky winter clothing might be working entirely against you. Let us look at the jacket itself. In the summer you might fish in a light shirt. Your profile is slim, But in the dead of winter, you are bundled up in layers. You have a giant insulated parka with a thick hood, maybe a fur collar, and big bulky sleeves. This jacket does not just keep you warm, it changes your entire physical shape. You no longer look like a slim human standing on the edge. You look like a massive, wide, unnatural structure. When you stand up straight, that oversized profile is magnified by the low winter sun. You are essentially turning yourself into a walking billboard that blocks out the light. Every time you turn your body, that wide profile shifts. When you raise your arms to cast or to jig your rod, those thick sleeves create massive moving shadows that flap and wave over the ice. The bulkier you are, the bigger the disturbance you create. I know staying warm is the top priority when the wind is howling and the temperature drops. But you have to realize that this extra bulk comes with a serious stealth penalty. You are projecting a much larger and much more intimidating footprint into the strike zone. The fish do not know it is just a coat. They just see a massive shifting black blob that covers a huge area of their living space. Another crucial detail we need to talk about is water clarity in the winter. This is a massive game changer that many guys completely ignore. During the warm summer months, lakes and rivers are full of algae, plankton, and suspended dirt. The water is often stained or cloudy. In those muddy conditions, a shadow might not penetrate very deep at all. But when the water turns freezing cold, all that algae dies off and sinks to the bottom. The water becomes crystal clear. It is like looking through a freshly washed glass window. In this super clear winter water, light travels much further, and shadows penetrate much deeper. That means your 20-foot silhouette is sharp, dark, and highly visible to any fish swimming around down there. They can see every little movement you make from a long way off. Because the water is so clear, the contrast between the bright sunlit areas and your dark shadow is extreme. There is nowhere for the shadow to blend in. It cuts through the clear water like a hot knife. So, the very same spot that was forgiving and murky in July is now completely transparent in January. You cannot get away with the same sloppy habits. If you stand right on the edge of the bank, that clear water broadcasts your bulky shadow straight to the fish. If you are ice fishing, the shadow problem takes on a whole new level of importance. Let us break down how light works on a frozen lake. When you have early season black ice, or clear ice without any snow on top, the ice acts like a magnifying glass. The light shines right through it, illuminating everything below. Standing on bare, clear ice is exactly like standing on a glass floor. Your dark winter jacket will cast a massive, hard-edged shadow right down onto the lake bottom. Now, some guys think that if there is a layer of snow on the ice, the shadow problem magically disappears. That is a very common myth. While heavy snow does diffuse the light and make it softer, a bright winter sun will still push your shadow through a few inches of snow and ice. It might not have perfectly sharp edges, but it will still create a large, dark, moving patch in an otherwise bright environment. Fish notice this moving dark patch. Think about it from their perspective. The whole ceiling of their world is glowing with diffused sunlight coming through the snow. Suddenly, a giant dark blob slides across the ceiling. Do not fool yourself into thinking the snow is a magic shield. It just softens the edges of your giant shadow. Let us talk about the way you move when you are wearing all that winter gear. You are never standing perfectly still. You are constantly shifting your weight to stay warm. You are reeling in, checking your bait, jigging your lure, or digging your freezing hands deep into your pockets. Every single one of these small movements is amplified by your heavy winter jacket. When you raise a bulky arm to set the hook or clear ice from your guides, that huge sleeve casts a fast, sweeping shadow across the water. Dynamic, moving shadows are 10 times worse than stationary shadows. A fish might eventually get used to a dark spot if it never moves. It might just think it is a tree or a dock. But a shadow that twitches, waves, and rapidly changes shape, That is the universal signal for a living predator. Every time you aggressively jig your rod while standing up, you are sending a strobe light effect of shadows straight down into the strike zone. You are essentially waving a giant black flag that tells every fish within 20 feet to pack up and leave. The jacket makes your movements clumsy and exaggerated, which in turn makes your shadows clumsy and exaggerated. You have to become aware of how your physical movements translate into light. So why do we specifically say this affects fish in a 20-foot radius? Let us do a little bit of simple winter math. Because the sun never gets high overhead during the winter months, the angle of the light is always very shallow. If the sun is sitting low on the horizon, your shadow does not drop straight down at your feet. It stretches out long and thin across the ice or the water. If you are standing a few feet back from your fishing hole, your shadow could easily extend 10, 15, or even 20 feet past where your bait is sitting. That means you are not just spooking the fish directly under your nose. You are creating a massive danger zone that covers a huge area of the water. Any fish trying to approach your bait from the direction of your shadow has to swim through this dark, intimidating tunnel of doom. Most wild fish are simply not going to do that. They will skirt around the edges of the shadow, staying safely out of reach of your presentation. This is why you can sit on a great piece of structure, see fish on your sonar, but never get a single bite. It is a psychological barrier for the fish. They prefer the safety of deep, stable light conditions over the terrifying dark zone you just created. The shadow effect is incredibly devastating when you are fishing in shallow water. Let us say you are targeting panfish, trout, or walleye in less than 10 feet of water. In these shallow zones, there is very little distance between the surface and the bottom. The shadow does not have time or space to fade out or diffuse. It hits the bottom with sharp, crisp edges. It is totally black. When you walk up to a shallow spot in your big winter coat, it is like turning off the lights in a small room. The impact is sudden and drastic. In deep water, say 30 or 40 feet down, a shadow might scatter and weaken before it reaches the fish. But in the shallows, the fish get the full, unfiltered force of your silhouette. I have seen guys march right up to a 5-foot deep hole, stand right on the edge in a bright, bulky coat, and wonder why the fish scatter immediately. In shallow water, stealth is absolutely everything. If you cast a massive dark shape over a shallow weed bed, every living thing in that grass is going to hunker down and lock their jaws tight. You have to be a ghost on the bank. If you fail to respect the shallows, the fish will vanish before you even tie on your hook. There is an old-school myth that I hear all the time from guys who have been fishing for decades. They will tell you that fish cannot see well in the winter, or that fish under the ice are basically blind. That is completely false. In fact, it is the exact opposite. Fish eyes are perfectly adapted to their environment. Many species, especially walleye, crappie, and trout, have excellent low-light vision. Their eyes are built to gather light in dark environments, so they can hunt at dawn, dusk, and under the ice. Because they are so good at seeing in low light, they are incredibly sensitive to changes in contrast. They do not need bright sunshine to see your shadow. They just need a slight difference in the light entering the water. When you stand over a hole with a massive coat on, you are creating a high contrast edge between the light coming through the ice and the dark spot of your body. To a fish with highly sensitive eyes, that high contrast edge is practically glowing with danger. So do not ever assume that the fish cannot see you just because it looks dark or gloomy to your human eyes. Their survival depends on spotting tiny shifts in the light. Your massive dark jacket is the biggest shift they will see all season. Let us dig deeper into this idea of contrast, because it is the key to understanding how fish see you. Imagine a beautiful winter day. Everything is covered in pristine, bright white snow. The sky is bright, the glare is intense. Now, drop a giant dark green or black winter jacket into the middle of that scene. The contrast is absolutely extreme. To a fish looking up toward the surface, The bright snowy background acts like a massive light box. Anything dark that moves across that light box is silhouetted perfectly. Your jacket creates a solid, impenetrable block of dark against a blindingly bright background. It is the highest possible level of visual contrast. Fish use contrast to spot their prey. A dark bug against a bright sky is food, but a giant, man-sized dark blob against a bright sky is a predator. If you are wearing a massive dark jacket on a bright snowy day, you are making yourself the most obvious, high-contrast object in their entire field of view. Every time you shift your weight, that dark block twitches against the bright background. It is an alarm bell that never stops ringing. Understanding how your jacket contrasts with the background light is vital if you want to stop spooking fish and start catching them. So, how do we fix this? The absolute easiest and most effective adjustment you can make is to pay attention to the sun. It sounds ridiculously simple, but 90% of fishermen never even look up to check where the sun is. Whenever you approach a spot, figure out the sun angle before you do anything else. You always want the sun in your face or at your side. You never want the sun at your back when you are standing right on the edge of the water or the ice hole. If the sun is at your back, your heavy jacket is throwing a massive shadow directly over the strike zone. You are literally casting a dark blanket right over the exact spot where you want the fish to bite. If you walk up to a spot and see your shadow pointing directly at your fishing hole, stop. Walk around to the other side. Position yourself so that your shadow falls behind you, onto the snow or the bank, away from the water. Just by turning around and facing the sun, you completely remove the shadow threat from the 20-foot radius in front of you. This one tiny shift in where you stand can take a spot from dead quiet to instantly active, just because the fish no longer feel a giant shadow looming over them. Let us talk about a scientific concept called the cone of vision. If you really want to understand how fish see your winter jacket, you need to know this. Because of the way light bends when it hits the water, fish look up through a circular window. Imagine a funnel expanding upward from the fish directly to the surface. Everything outside that circle is blurry or acts like a mirror, but everything inside that circle is perfectly clear to the fish. When the water is shallow, that window at the surface is fairly small. But as the fish goes deeper, that cone expands, and their window to the outside world gets much wider. When you stand near the edge of the water or an ice hole, your towering, bulky figure easily breaches the edge of this cone of vision. The fish might be swimming 15 feet away, but because of how light bends, they can look up and see the top half of your jacket protruding into their clear window. They see the bulky shoulders, the big hood, and the waving arms. You might think you are standing far enough back, but the physics of light says otherwise. You have to keep your bulky shoulders entirely out of that window if you want them to feel comfortable enough to eat. The moment of approach is often when the biggest mistakes are made. Picture this. It is totally quiet on the water. The fish are relaxed. Some nice big bluegills or perch are hovering around a weed bed, feeling safe. Then, here you come. You come stomping out in your massive boots and your giant coat, walking directly toward the spot. As you walk, your 20-foot shadow sweeps aggressively across the ice, plunging the weed bed into sudden darkness. That abrupt transition from bright light to dark shadow is what does the most damage. It is a massive shock to the fish system. It is not just the presence of the shadow, it is the sudden speed at which it appears. Even if you eventually stop moving and stand perfectly still, the damage is already done. You have triggered their fight or flight response. Once a big winter fish is spooked by a sudden shadow, it can take hours for them to calm down and start feeding again. You might drill your hole, drop your bait, and sit there wondering why they will not bite. The truth is, you ruined the spot before your bait even hit the water. Do not let your excitement ruin the spot. Walk slow, watch your shadow, and let the fish keep their peace. A lot of guys ask me if the color of their winter jacket makes a difference. Does a bright red snowmobile jacket spook fish more than a camouflage hunting parka? The answer is a bit tricky, but it comes back to how shadows actually work. A shadow is simply an area where light is blocked. Whether the object blocking the light is neon pink or camo green, the shadow it casts on the bottom is still going to be dark. So, in terms of the shadow projecting on the bottom, the color of your jacket does not matter at all. The size and bulk matter much more. However, color does matter when the fish are looking directly up at you through the surface window. If you're wearing a bright white jacket against a dark skyline of trees, you stand out. If you are wearing a dark jacket against a bright white sky, you stand out. The most important thing is to avoid being a giant high-contrast blob. But do not think that buying a white camo jacket gives you permission to stand with your back to the sun. Camouflage does not stop your body from blocking the sun. A 20-foot shadow is still a 20-foot shadow. You cannot buy your way out of bad positioning. Stand right and the color will not matter, will. Wind is another huge factor when you are wearing heavy winter gear. Winter fishing usually means dealing with cold, biting winds. When you wear a giant baggy parka, you are basically wearing a sail. As the wind gusts, it catches the bulk of your jacket. It makes the fabric flap around, and it forces you to constantly sway and shift your feet just to maintain your balance. You might not even realize you are doing it. But every time the wind pushes your body, your shadow dances wildly across the water below. You are creating a chaotic, flickering light show over the fish. Remember what we said earlier about moving shadows? They signal a living, breathing threat. A steady shadow is bad, but a vibrating, wind-blown shadow is an absolute deal-breaker for cautious fish. The bigger and puffier your coat is, the more the wind will throw you around. This is why more modern, slim-fitting winter gear can actually help you catch more fish. By reducing your profile, you do not just stay warmer, you reduce how much the wind pushes you around. A tighter jacket keeps your shadow contained and your movements deliberate. That translates directly to less spooked fish and more bites on those windy days. Let me give you a perfect example of a situation I see every single winter. A guy gets to the lake at dawn. He finds a great drop-off. He drills his hole or finds a clear spot on the bank. He is using ultralight line. He has the smallest, most natural-looking tungsten jig. He has fresh live bait. His presentation is absolutely flawless. But he spends the next 3 hours standing right over the hole, facing away from the sun, hands shoved deep into his massive jacket pockets. He watches his electronics and sees fish coming up to the bait, looking at it, and swimming away. He gets frustrated. He changes colors, he changes baits, he downsizes his line even more. Nothing works. He goes home and complains that the fish were just heavily pressured or in a negative mood. But the reality is, his presentation was perfectly fine. The problem was the giant, dark, hulking shadow he was projecting directly over the bait for 3 hours. Every time he shifted his weight to stay warm, his shadow shifted over the fish. The fish were interested in the bait, but they were absolutely terrified of the giant dark monster looming above them. He defeated himself before he even started, just by where he decided to stand. If you want to solve the bulk and shadow problem without freezing to death, the best tactic is to simply get low. Sit down. Do not stand up and loom over the water like a giant. Bring a small folding chair, a bucket, or sit directly on your tackle box. When you sit down, you instantly cut your height in half. That means you cut your shadow length in half. Your profile becomes much smaller, much rounder, and much less intimidating. When you are sitting, your arms are kept closer to your body, so your movements are tighter and cast smaller, moving shadows. The fish looking up through their cone of vision are far less likely to see a low, seated profile. You blend in better with the horizon, and your shadow does not stretch 20 feet out into the strike zone. Getting low is the ultimate stealth move for winter fishing. It takes a little more effort to stand up when you hook a big one, but sitting quietly and keeping your heavy jacket out of the sky is the fastest way to increase your bite rate. You will be amazed at how much closer fish will come and how much more aggressively they will strike when they do not feel a towering predator watching them. Another pro tactic to handle the shadow trap is to adopt a true stealth approach. Stop treating your fishing spot like your living room. When you find a spot you want to fish, do not march right up to the edge. If you are ice fishing, drill your holes and then walk away. Take your giant winter jacket, your sled, and your gear, and back off by at least 20 or 30 feet. Let the area rest for 10 or 15 minutes. Let the light conditions stabilize. Let the fish realize the shadow monster has left. When you finally go back to fish, approach from the side facing the sun, so your shadow falls behind you. Walk slowly, with soft steps. Do not wave your arms around. Keep your jacket zipped tight to reduce your profile. Drop your bait down smoothly and sit down immediately. You have to start thinking like a hunter creeping up on a deer. You would not wear a giant, noisy, flapping coat and stand tall in the middle of a field to shoot a buck. You should not do it when you are targeting big, smart winter fish either. Stealth is about controlling your footprint, and your shadow is the biggest footprint you leave on the water. We also have to consider the intense pressure these fish face. In modern times, lakes and rivers get hammered by fishermen all winter long. Fish are not stupid. They learn to associate certain things with danger. Highly pressured fish have seen every lure, every bait, and every trick in the book. But more importantly, they have seen thousands of 20-foot shadows sweeping over their heads. They know exactly what that dark moving patch means. They know it means loud drilling, strange noises, and getting dragged out of the water. When fish are highly pressured, they become hypersensitive to shadows. A dumb, hungry summer fish might ignore a shadow if it wants to eat badly enough. But a pressured winter fish will use that shadow as an excuse to lock its jaw and refuse to eat anything. If you want to outsmart fish that have seen it all, you cannot make the same sloppy mistakes everyone else makes. You have to remove every single red flag from the equation. Hiding your shadow, managing the bulk of your jacket, and maintaining extreme stealth is how you catch the smart fish. You have to prove you are not a threat, and the only way to do that is to vanish entirely from their field of view. To wrap this all together, you have to completely change the way you think about your physical presence on the water. Your heavy winter jacket is essential for keeping you warm, but it is also a huge liability if you do not understand the physics of light. The combination of a low winter sun, clear winter water, and a massive, bulky silhouette creates a perfect storm that spooks fish in a massive 20-foot radius. The old-school guys might tell you to just drill a hole, stand tall, and drop a line. But the old ways do not account for clear water, highly pressured fish, and the harsh realities of winter shadows. You need to be smarter than that. You have to manage your shadow just like you manage your bait. Check the sun angle before you walk up to a spot. Keep your shadow behind you. Sit down to reduce your giant profile. Minimize your wild arm movements so your jacket does not cast flickering shadows. If you start treating your shadow as a physical object that can ruin your spot, your catch rates are going to skyrocket. You will stop spooking the best fish before you even make a cast, and finally outsmart them on their own turf. Let us do a quick recap. The biggest takeaway here is that your comfort might be killing your catch rate. We figured out that a low winter sun turns a bulky jacket into a massive 20-foot shadow monster. We proved that clear water and sensitive fish eyes make that shadow a blaring alarm bell, especially if you are fishing in the shallows. The most unexpected turning point is realizing that you can have the perfect bait, the perfect line, and the perfect spot. But if you stand with the sun at your back, you are guaranteeing an empty bucket. This completely changes how you approach a winter fishing spot. You are not just a guy with a rod anymore. You are a hunter, actively managing your stealth. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me today. If this shadow trick just blew your mind, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Leave a like on the video and drop down into the comments. I want to know, have you ever noticed your shadow ruining a spot? Or did you think fish under the ice were totally blind? Let us argue about it down below.